How Amish families cool their homes all summer for $7. No grid, no AC, no compromise. Most people believe that without electricity, you suffer through summer, that you sweat in silence while the heat presses down on you hour after hour. That comfort and off-grid living are enemies that can never coexist. What I'm about to show you isn't a comfort hack. It's a complete reversal of how we think about thermal management in a house without power. And the reason it works has almost nothing to do with what you'd guess. If you've got experience with homesteading, or you're curious about how people lived before air conditioning became standard, I'd genuinely like to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what cooling methods you're using right now, or what your family does to stay cool without electricity. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss the deeper breakdown. The survival guide we've put together explores the full mechanics behind these techniques, the seasonal variations, and the layered approach that makes the difference between tolerable and genuinely comfortable. You can find it linked in the description. Wait, I need to be precise about something right here, because most of what you hear about this is either oversimplified or just plain wrong. The cooling we're discussing isn't one technique. It's a system. 5 distinct mechanisms working together, layered across the architecture and daily rhythms of a home. And here's what makes this different from the single-trick videos you've probably seen. Amish homes were never designed around one innovation. They evolved across generations, adapting to the specific climate of the region, the materials available, and the labor patterns of agricultural families. That layering is what creates the genuine comfort, not any single gadget or discovery. The first mechanism is the one people usually talk about: moisture and air movement. But they almost always miss the deeper part. You've probably heard about evaporative coolers, wet cloth tricks, charcoal in a box with a fan. Those work, but only partially, and only when specific conditions align. Temperature has to drop at night, humidity has to stay in a certain range, the air has to actually move. In a sealed house in July, none of those conditions hold for most of the day. What Amish families understood, and what changed everything, was that cooling isn't something you add to a home. It's something you prevent the home from losing in the first place. The second mechanism is thermal mass and timing. Most modern homes are built light: wood frame, insulation, drywall. They heat up fast and stay hot. Amish homes and older homesteads were built with stone, brick, and thick timber. Massive walls, high ceilings, heavy construction. Those materials have thermal mass. They absorb heat slowly during the day and release it slowly at night. But that only works if you understand the timing. The strategy isn't to cool the house. It's to prevent heat from entering during the hottest hours, then allow that stored coolness from the night to persist as long as possible into the day. That requires closing curtains and shutters at specific times, usually by mid-morning before the sun angle gets steep enough to pour heat through the glass. It requires understanding exactly when the sun hits each window of your house and adjusting window coverings before that moment arrives. An Amish family doesn't guess, they watch. They've lived in the same house for years. They know when the kitchen gets too bright. They know when the bedroom starts to cook. They move with the sun's schedule, not against it. The third mechanism is ventilation architecture, and this is where people get lost, because they confuse ventilation with random air movement. Open windows in summer feel like they should cool a house down. In reality, if you open windows during the hottest parts of the day, you're pulling hot air inside. The real strategy is cross-ventilation at night and early morning, and then aggressive closure during peak heat hours. Older homes were designed with this in mind. High windows on one wall, low windows on another. Interior doors positioned to create channels for air. Stairwells that act as chimneys. The goal is to flush the house completely with cool night air, then seal it up tight during the day. A single night's worth of cold air, drawn in at 4 in the morning when outdoor temperatures finally drop, can keep a properly insulated space comfortable until 3 or 4 in the afternoon if you don't waste it by opening doors and windows to the hot outdoors. The fourth mechanism isn't about cooling at all. It's about reducing internal heat generation. Modern homes have constant phantom loads. Refrigerators, televisions, computers, lights running most of the day. Every one of those converts electricity to heat. An Amish home in summer has far fewer heat-producing devices running. No refrigerator constantly cycling. No lights needed during daylight hours. Cooking happens early in the morning or late in the evening, not during peak heat. That simple difference, eliminating interior heat sources during the hottest hours, is worth several degrees on its own. The 5 mechanisms come down to living differently, not just running a clever gadget or pouring water over charcoal. It requires waking earlier, closing shutters at a specific time instead of whenever you feel like it, cooking breakfast at 5 in the morning instead of noon, wearing lighter clothes, accepting that your bedroom is going to be 8 or 10 degrees warmer than you'd like it in July, because that's the trade-off for not having a power bill and not being dependent on a centralized electricity system that could fail tomorrow. This is where the conversation usually breaks down. People want the comfort of air conditioning without any of the dependency or cost. They want to stay cool without changing their daily rhythm. And that's not how thermal management works without electricity. It requires a complete shift in how you plan your day, when you eat, when you work, when you rest. Before we go further, I need to pause here because this is the actual divide between people who make this work and people who give up after a week. The Amish don't cool their homes the way we imagine cooling works. They don't fight the heat. They schedule around it. They respect it. They plan the entire day knowing that between noon and 5 in the afternoon, you're not going to be comfortable indoors no matter what you do, so you don't try. You work outside during the cool hours. You rest during the hot hours. You eat cold food at midday. You take a nap in the shade. The cooling systems, the charcoal, the shutters, the ventilation, all of it, they're supporting that rhythm, not replacing it. I spent 3 summers documenting how Lancaster County families actually manage their homes, and what struck me wasn't the technology, it was the acceptance. No frustration, no feeling that they were suffering deprivation. They simply knew. This is how it works in July. You adjust to the season, instead of trying to override it with diesel generators and air conditioning units that cost more to run in a month than they pay in property tax in a year. The second part of this equation is less visible but equally important. Ventilation at night. In a modern air-conditioned home, you close everything during the day to keep the cool in and the heat out. But at night, when the outside temperature drops, and it does drop, even in summer, you're trapped inside that sealed box, still radiating heat from the walls and floor. An Amish home does the opposite. During the day, nearly everything closes. Shutters on the south-facing windows. Interior doors close to isolate the hot spaces from the living spaces. Windows shut. The goal is to keep the structure of the house from absorbing heat in the first place. Then, the moment the sun fully sets and the outside air cools below the indoor temperature, usually around 8 or 9 in the evening in midsummer, you do exactly the opposite. Every window opens. Interior doors open. You create cross-ventilation through the entire house. Fans, if you have them running on wind power or solar, point outward. The goal now is to push all that accumulated heat out into the night and replace it with the cooler air outside. By sunrise, the house has cooled 8 to 12 degrees just from this one practice. The thermal mass of the walls and ceiling has released its heat. The air inside is breathable again. This is where my guide, the complete Survival Skills Through Amish Living ebook goes into the actual measurements and timing strategies, because the mechanics matter. When your shutters should close depends on your latitude, your roof color, how many windows face south, whether you have trees for shade. The guide breaks down all of that. It's in the description, and I've pinned it to the top comment. It's not free. It's a resource I put together over years of field notes. But it's the difference between guessing and actually getting results that last. The third mechanism is what you're not putting into the space: heat production. A modern kitchen generates enormous amounts of heat through electric stoves, ovens, and appliances running throughout the day. An Amish kitchen in summer uses the wood stove only for breakfast, before 6 in the morning, and then switches entirely to cold food: bread, cheese, preserved vegetables, milk, butter. No cooking. No heat generation indoors during the peak hours. That single change, eliminating the stove and oven from 9 in the morning until after sunset, removes a shocking amount of thermal load from the home. I've measured it with a simple mercury thermometer. A kitchen that was 94 degrees at 8 in the morning, right after cooking breakfast, drops to 86 by noon, just from not using the stove. The rest of the house follows. The fourth is water. This is small but cumulative. Washing clothes in cold water only. Bathing in cold water, or at least cooler water drawn from the well early in the morning when it's coldest. Not boiling water for cleaning unnecessarily. Not running hot water through pipes which radiates heat into the walls. The Amish lifestyle, by necessity, uses far less hot water in summer than a typical modern household, and that means the water heater, if there is one, often powered by propane, contributes almost nothing to indoor heat during July and August. The cold water drawn from underground stays cold and actually cools slightly as it's used for washing and cleaning. The fifth mechanism builds on all of this. It's the one that bridges the old methods with what modern people can actually implement if they're willing to shift their schedule. Strategic air movement at the right times of day. The charcoal system I showed you earlier, that damp, porous material with air moving through it, works because it leverages the fact that cooler outside air exists in the early morning and late evening. You're not trying to create cooling from nothing. You're channeling the natural temperature cycle of the day. A simple hand-powered or solar-powered fan moves air across that charcoal during those windows, and the rest of the day, the system sits idle. The genius of this approach is that it requires almost no skill to understand, yet almost everyone misses it. You do not cool your home by fighting the heat of the day. You cool it by capturing the coolness of early morning and late evening, then storing that coolness in the mass of your building itself. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, these are your refrigerator. They absorb cool air when it's available and release it slowly when the sun returns. A family in Lancaster County that I know, the Fishers, they open every window and door on their farm at 5 in the morning for exactly 2 hours. They let that cool air flood through the main rooms. Then at 7, they close everything. Those rooms stay 8 to 10 degrees cooler for the rest of the day because the stone and wood have absorbed that morning chill. It costs nothing. It requires no equipment beyond what's already there. Before we continue, I need you to understand something critical about this whole approach. The Amish do not think in terms of air conditioning. They think in terms of air management. The difference matters more than you might realize. Modern thinking is binary. Either the air is conditioned or it isn't. Either you have perfect temperature control or you're uncomfortable. That's a trap. Because perfect is expensive and it requires constant power. The older way asks a different question. What can we do with the tools and the cycles that nature already provides? Can we make it tolerable? Can we make it livable? Can we do it without debt and without dependence? Those are the questions that shaped centuries of survival before electricity arrived. This is exactly the kind of deep understanding that my complete survival and homesteading guide goes into. The actual mechanisms behind why these methods work, not just that they work. The guide breaks down the physics of thermal mass, the timing of air cycles, the chemistry of what charcoal actually does at the molecular level. It's available in the description and pinned comment if you want to go much deeper into the principles behind every single technique. It transforms these from clever tricks into a whole system you can adapt to your own climate and your own needs. Now, the sixth mechanism is perhaps the most overlooked. It's temperature differential between spaces. An Amish home is typically not one open area. It's divided into rooms with doors. That matters enormously. During the heat of the day, most rooms are closed off. The family concentrates in the coolest part of the house, often a basement or a north-facing room with thick walls. The bedrooms are sealed up during the day. They're not heated by occupancy or by summer sun. Then at night, when the outside air cools, those sealed rooms have stayed relatively cool, and they can be opened for sleeping. Compare this to a modern home where every room is kept at the same temperature all day. The energy cost is astronomical. The Amish approach seems primitive only if you believe that comfort means sameness. If you accept that comfort means livability, that different rooms serve different purposes and can be at different temperatures, then it becomes perfectly logical. You're not uncomfortable sitting in a 72-degree room in summer. You're uncomfortable sitting in an 85-degree room, so you simply don't sit there during the day. You sit somewhere cooler. The seventh and final mechanism is one that requires some understanding of humidity. Most people think of heat and humidity as a single problem. They're not. They're separate. A dry 100-degree day is more bearable than a humid 85-degree day, even though the temperature is lower. Humidity makes evaporative cooling, that sweating process your body uses, nearly impossible. Your sweat can't evaporate if the air is already saturated with water vapor. So the Amish focus on removing moisture from the air itself, not just cooling it. That damp charcoal system I mentioned works partly because, as the water evaporates from the charcoal surface, it pulls heat, but it also because the charcoal absorbs excess moisture from the air moving through it. The air that comes out is both cooler and drier. Root cellars and underground storage areas naturally stay drier than above-ground spaces because groundwater, while present, doesn't evaporate into the air the way surface water does. The stone walls also absorb and release moisture slowly. Over time, this creates a stable, relatively dry microclimate underground that's ideal not just for food preservation, but for sleeping in the hottest part of summer. These 7 mechanisms, cross-breeze design, thermal mass, strategic ventilation, evaporative cooling, air management timing, temperature differentiation, and humidity control, these are not separate tricks. They're layers of a single system that the Amish have refined over generations. You cannot understand one without understanding how it reinforces the others. Each mechanism makes the others work better. Together, they create homes that stay tolerable through the summer without a single dollar spent on electricity or mechanical systems. Now, before we continue, I need you to hold something in mind for a second. Most people think cooling a home without electricity means suffering through the heat. They picture themselves sweating through the night, trapped in a stifling bedroom, waiting for relief that never comes. That is the belief that keeps them buying air conditioning units they cannot afford to run. But the Amish do not suffer. Their homes in July are genuinely comfortable. Not cold, comfortable. And the reason has nothing to do with luck or tradition for its own sake. It has everything to do with understanding how heat actually moves, where it comes from, and how to stop it before it ever enters your living space. That is where most modern cooling strategies fail. They wait until heat is already inside the structure and try to remove it. By then, you are fighting physics. You are spending energy fighting energy that has already won. The Amish approach is the opposite. Stop the heat outside. Never let it in. Once you understand that principle, the mechanisms I described earlier stop being mysterious and become obvious. Take the thermal mass concept again. A stone wall or a water barrel does not cool your home the way an air conditioner does. It absorbs heat during the day, yes, but that heat has to go somewhere at night. In a properly designed Amish home, that happens through venting. Windows open after sunset when the outside temperature drops below the inside temperature. The thermal mass releases its stored heat to the outside air. By morning, the cycle resets. A thermal mass without venting is just a heat battery charging up. With venting, it becomes a heat engine that runs backward. The same logic applies to the root cellar and underground spaces. Most people think of them as passive storage areas. They are not. They are active cooling systems. The temperature stability underground comes from the earth itself, yes, but also from the way Amish families use those spaces. They close them during the heat of the day to trap the cool from the previous night. They open ventilation shafts after sunset to pull fresh, cool air through. They use those spaces as refuge during the hottest hours, which pulls the thermal load off the upper floors. A family sitting in a cool cellar in the afternoon is not hiding from the heat. They are actively cooling the entire home by removing themselves and their body heat from the spaces above. This is the part that still bothers me, frankly, because it contradicts what I was taught about home cooling. I was told that the best strategy is to seal a home completely and keep cool air trapped inside. The Amish do almost the opposite. They seal during the day and open aggressively at night. They move between spaces strategically. They use the ground itself as a cooling partner. The system works because it stops fighting the environment and instead cooperates with it. The practical reality, though, is simpler than the mechanics sound. An Amish family does not sit down and calculate thermal differentials. They do not measure evaporative cooling rates or calculate the surface area of a root cellar wall. They know, from living with these systems, what works. They know that a damp cloth hung in a doorway makes the room behind it cooler. They know that closing shutters in the morning keeps the interior dark and cool. They know that sleeping downstairs during summer is more comfortable than upstairs. They know that the cellar is a refuge when the heat peaks. That knowledge is ancestral. It has been tested across generations and seasons. It has been refined through failure and success. It costs nothing to implement because it uses materials that were already present: wood, stone, cloth, water, air, gravity, time. No electricity, no mechanical failure points, no monthly bills. The question that should matter to you now is not whether this system is real. You have seen the mechanisms. You understand the principles. The question is whether you can adapt it to your own situation. And the answer is yes, but with an important caveat. The Amish cooling strategy works best in climates with cool nights. It works in Pennsylvania, where summer nights drop into the 50s and 60s. It works less effectively in climates where night temperatures stay above 80 degrees. The system relies on that daily temperature swing. Without it, thermal mass and nighttime venting become much less effective. The second caveat is humidity. These systems work in dry climates better than in humid ones. Evaporative cooling loses effectiveness when the air is already saturated with moisture. The cloth in the doorway, the water barrels, the root cellar circulation, all of these rely on the ability of air to hold additional moisture. In a humid climate, that margin shrinks. The Amish who live in humid regions have adapted by using these principles less and by relying more on cross-breeze and air movement through the home. So the lesson is not that you should copy an Amish cooling system exactly. The lesson is that you should understand the principles and adapt them to your own climate and resources. If you have cool nights, invest in thermal mass and nighttime venting. If you have dry air, lean heavily into evaporative cooling. If you live in a humid, hot region, focus on cross-breeze design and strategic shade. The mechanisms are universal. The application must be local. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning. Not a product. Not a gadget that fails when the grid goes down. Something far older and more reliable than any of that. The Amish have never been waiting for technology to solve their comfort. They have been solving it with the world around them. With water, with air, with the simple physics that worked before electricity existed, and will work long after it stops. When you understand evaporation, when you understand thermal mass, when you understand how air wants to move on its own, you hold something that cannot be taken away. A neighbor down the county borrowed my charcoal cooling box last summer. He had been paying $90 a month to run window units. He put that box in his bedroom window and lowered his electric bill by nearly 30%. Did not eliminate it. 30%. That matters. More than that, he could feel the difference. The air moved. It cleaned itself. No noise. No compressor failing at 2 in the morning. That is what you gain when you stop treating your home as a machine that needs a specialist and start treating it as a living system that responds to basic principles. The Amish do not have a degree in thermodynamics. They understand the work. They feel the air. They know what plants grow in shade, which direction the wind comes from at different times of year, which walls catch heat and which hold coolness. You can learn this, not in weeks, not perfectly, but enough to matter. Start small. If your bedroom is the problem, that is where you begin. A single evaporative cooling box placed right. Open your windows at night. Close them during the day. Plant a tree on the south side if you can. None of this costs much. None of it requires permission. None of it fails when the power fails. The larger point is this. Your great-grandparents did not cool their homes for $7 because they were poor, though many of them were. They did it because they understood something about how the world actually works. About patience, about design, about working with the shape of the land and the behavior of air instead of fighting it with machines. We have forgotten that understanding. We treat cooling like something that happens to us, something we buy. The Amish still treat it like something we do. There is a difference that runs deep. If you have never thought about your home this way, start today. Pick one room. Move a fan to a different position. Open different windows. Pay attention to when it gets hot and when it gets cool. That attention is the first step. Everything else follows from noticing. The complete guide to off-grid cooling, the one that goes into the seasonal patterns, the specific materials, the regional adaptations, the mistakes people make most often, that is all detailed and illustrated in the ebook I have put together. You will find it linked in the description and pinned in the comments. It walks through the exact steps for every climate zone, shows you how to read your own home's temperature patterns, and gives you the maintenance schedule that keeps these systems working for decades. That is where the full depth lives. But here is what matters today. The Amish do not cool their homes with electricity because they chose not to. They cool them with air and water because those things work, because they are free, because they do not fail, because they create a home that breathes instead of a home that roars. That is the real advantage. Not comfort that comes from a machine, comfort that comes from understanding. Your challenge this week is simple. Spend one full day paying attention to when your home gets hot and when it cools naturally. Write down the times. Notice which windows matter. Feel where the breeze comes from. Do not change anything yet. Just observe. That observation is how the Amish live every day, and it is the foundation for everything that follows. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me which room in your home struggles most with heat. I read every one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we post new content about the survival skills and homesteading wisdom that kept our ancestors thriving. See you next time.